Hey everybody, this is Kyle Altair here, and this is the second video on my video series of me establishing my own formicarium and ant colony. So this will be the next one that's actually going to be talking about the technique that I'm going to use to ensure that when I have multiple formicarium, how am I going to connect everything, as well as talking about the outworld that I'm going to have to set up. So I'm going to go ahead and just rip straight to it, and I'm going to show you the sketch as well as my idea, and hopefully you guys will learn something and be able to use my idea. Never know. So, all right, let's go ahead and get to it real quick. Alrighty, guys. So here is my idea for the next portion of making this formicarium work. So as you see, I have three things on here, as well as this exhibition. So what this is going to be, this is an example of having what I call a junction box. And as you can see here in my sketch, the junction box is going to be the place in which all the ants will converge so that they can get from one formicarium to the other. So here you see I have 5 different formicarium, and I have the outworld itself, which we'll get to in a second. So the point of this is that if an ant wants to go from, say, this spot to, let's say, the outworld, normally, or what I would think someone would do, is just have tubes that either connect in a circle, or they would just have each tube have a tube connected to each of these. My idea for this for a junction box is to take out all the clutter that would be made when you have all these different tubes, and just have each formicarium have one tube that go to a junction box, and that junction box will connect everything together. So for the example of going from here to the outworld, instead of normally the ant going from this formicarium to all these different ones to get to here, it would just go from formicarium A, junction box, outworld, and it'll create a nice little network of traffic. Here, this is how it'll look like roughly. As you can see, it's a lot more spread out. I originally drilled some holes in here, which was holding the plexiglass, but I decided to just remove it for a larger piece. The reasoning that I use is, if I'm going to have a larger ant colony, though this would suffice, I'm thinking of perhaps making this stand up. And to be honest, I don't want it to cover a lot of lateral surface area, but I would like it to be more of a box and less rectangular. And of course, I could just stand it up like this. The only problem with this is that it becomes very top heavy, and so it's just to stabilize it, I'll just make it more of a box, which is why I just took all these screws out, and I'll just redo it and probably make this probably a flat formicarium, or use it for something. I don't want to just waste it because it's pretty good wood and it's pretty strong, just like all the other pieces. So this would be the primary source for ant traffic, which is why it needs to be very spread out, have a larger surface area. They'll be more stable than this one, and it is also going to be the primary source of air as well. So my original issue when I made this was that how am I going to get air throughout all these different formicariums? Now I could get an air unit, which is just an aquarium bubbler. The one that I found, you can actually adjust the output air pressure, so it can go to be very light to being a very strong breeze coming out of it. So instead of having it and having like T-fittings that go to each tube, I decided if I centralize it and use this JBox, junction box, as the source, it can just go from the air unit through a tube to the junction box. It'll also have some netting to ensure that none of the ants can go into the tube, into the unit, and then escape. You'll have netting. The air will just get pushed from this JBox to all the different formicariums, which each have their own ventilation areas. So by doing that, it'll also be good for the hygrometer line that you saw in my previous video, because if this is all sealed up, and I'm trying to get a pressure reading from, let's say, this specific formicarium, I just seal it up, and then all the air that comes through the JBox to this specific one gets blown through, and then I can get the accurate reading that I told you about before. So this would be, to me, this is an excellent way to oxygenate the entire network and ensure that all the ants get what they need so that there isn't some die-off. And you can see here in this bottom one, this is for wintering the ants. So some ant species, a lot of ant species that I'm going to have are, the requirement to having them is you have to winter them, which is you have to simulate that it's winter time, the cold time, so that they can hibernate, the queen can rest, and she won't have to be overworked. And it's just a natural thing that you want to ensure your ants get if they require it, just to make sure that you don't disrupt their natural circadian rhythm. And when they wake up, when they go to bed, for heating, for the light output, as well as when they naturally hibernate, you want to make sure that you instill that even though they are in an artificial environment. So the original idea that I came up for this is to just have an ice box, essentially, not a refrigerator, but literally the styrofoam containers that they use, styrofoam coolers, fill it with ice, and then on one end I'll connect air, and then I'll connect a tube that's coming from the air unit, and on the other side have a tube that goes from the other side of the ice box to this JBox, so then the cold air can be circulated throughout all the formicarium. The only issue with that, potential issue, is that I have to do an experiment to see what temperature does the JBox go down to, as well as what is the temperature when it goes to the formicariums as well. And by getting that data, since it'll be in an enclosed area, that'll tell me how close, how far, and at what power do I need to have the heat lamp to make sure that they stay above freezing, and aren't so cold that they just, they freeze to death. So that'll be an experiment I'll have to do, and I'll show you guys in a separate video. But for now, this is just the idea of what I'm going to have. The last thing, it'll be this 4-way Outworld. So I want to show you guys the Outworld that I had made a few weeks ago, actually. So this is how it goes. This is going to be the floor of it, and this is the entire unit. Now, this specific model that I made is specifically for a large ant nest that I'm going to acquire in the next few months. But so the one that's going to be the four-way 4x4 Outworld is going to be a little bigger than this and more spread out. But this will be a good demo just to show you guys. So this 4-way Outworld, as you can see in this picture, is going to be one entire unit such as this, though it will be bigger, but it's going to be separated into 4s. And the point of that is to ensure that the different ant colonies that I'm going to have in here, ensure that they don't interact and fight. Because the last thing I want is for there to be some ant war and then I have a whole bunch of ants dying. I definitely don't want that. So in order to centralize the feeding location, as well as ensure that they are isolated, I'm going to just have a plexiglass wall that goes, that cuts it into 4s. It's going to be wood and plexiglass most likely. Have the wood be the wall and then the plexiglass, be the sealant, to make sure that they can't dig through it if they're a carpenter ant variety, or just to make sure that they can't dig through it, period, whether or not they are a carpenter ant colony. And then each formicarium network is going to connect to a junction box. As you can see here in this picture, it'll connect to a junction box, and then it'll have its own air supply. The only thing that will be shared is the air, because the unit that I'm going to purchase, it actually has 4 outlets, air outlets. So one tube will be for each formicarium network for each ant colony that I have, and then that'll just be how they eat. I'm going to ensure that I have a line though, so that each division for the 4x4 Outworld is going to have its own feeding tube It's going to be a larger one, probably 1/2 inch to 1 inch with a cap that has a strap on it, as well as a water line and some ventilation as well. And that'll be, of course, for the JBox, just to make sure all the air gets pushed out of the system and there is no stagnant air. And then once I do that, I can feed each individual ant colony whatever their favorite food is. And then because this is going to be filled with soil and maybe some plants, my intention is to keep it all sealed, since it's going to be sealed on all sides by plexiglass. And I'll just let it naturally degrade itself. So that's going to be my idea for everything. As a quick recap, we're going to have the JBox, which is going to connect everything together, providing a central source of travel for the ants, as well as a central way to oxygenate all the formicariums and Outworld. We're going to have the 4x4 Outworld itself, and the point of that will be just to make sure that everything is divided, as well as centralize where all the ant colonies eat. And for wintering ants, we're going to use an icebox that'll provide cold air to the JBox, which will provide cold air to all of these formicariums. So if you guys have any better ideas or would like to just give me your feedback, that'd be greatly appreciated. I really appreciate you guys for watching. And tune in next week for the last part of my 3-part series on developing this ant colony network. This is Kyle Altera. Thanks for watching. Please like, subscribe, and share with your friends. And I'll see you guys in the next video. Please stay blessed, and goodbye.